everyone, welcome to this Facebook Live. I am Alison Woodall and I'm a relocation coach. I am not a realtor. I have an online guide called Make the Move that has everything you need to plan your move to a new state. My goal is to give you all the information you need to minimize the stress of your move, because when you have a great plan, it allows you to stop worrying and just focus on the amazing life you're about to begin in your new state. And you can find out more about my Make the Move guide at AlisonWoodall.com. So I am guessing when you decided to move that you thought that the hardest part about moving would be finding the perfect home, booking your moving trucks and packing up and leaving. But you're probably now discovering that all of those emotions that are associated with moving are often much harder to deal with than the logistics of your move. I call this the emotional roller coaster of the relocation journey, because no matter how much you are looking forward to moving or how often you tell yourself that you're doing the right thing, fear or doubt or regret or guilt or sadness will threaten to overwhelm you at some point. Even if you are 110% certain about moving, you're leaving no one behind and you're excited about your move, you are still going to have moments where you feel apprehensive about the future. And if you are reluctantly relocating because of a spouse's job or for other reasons that feel out of your control, your emotions are going to feel even harder to deal with. And if your spouse or your kids don't want to move, or you're leaving adult children or grandchildren behind, then dealing with their feelings as well can make your emotions seem even more intense. But when you learn to control your emotions and find practical ways to deal with your fears and focus on the positives of your move, it makes everything just a little easier. And so how do you control those emotions? If you've watched any of my other lives or my videos on the Leaving California YouTube channel, you will know that I love to simplify a process into several steps. Well, managing your emotions is a 6-step process. The first step is to list everything that you're worrying about and then rank those worries from the biggest to the smallest. Step 2 is to look at everything that you're worrying about and then list anything that could go wrong. And I want you to go to absolute worst case scenario for everything that could happen. And then step 3 is to decide what you would do if that worst case scenario actually happened. And then step 4 is you are going to flip your thoughts and decide what could possibly be the best case scenario in each situation. And then step 5 is to decide what is one thing you could do right now that would make that best case scenario more likely to happen. And then step number 6, your final step, is when you are stressed, you need to force yourself to focus on the best case scenario and not the worst case scenario. But before we go through all of these steps in detail and I give you some examples, there are 2 very important concepts that I would like to share with you that have made so much difference in my life and have helped me to really enjoy every move that we've made and turn moving into an adventure and minimize the stress. The first concept is that life is 50-50, good and bad. And the second concept is that you can choose to think good thoughts instead of negative ones. And so concept number 1, that life is 50-50, good and bad, is what I consider a universal truth, because no matter who you are or how rich you are or how privileged you are still going to have good days and bad days. Even Jeff Bezos and Oprah's life is 50-50. Now their days may be, their bad day may be something like the private jet breaks down versus us who are stuck on the side of the road with a flat tire. But in their opinion, if you ask them, they still have good days and bad days. Their life is still 50-50. So when things go wrong, when you're exhausted and stressed, just remember that the planning, the packing up and the moving are the 50% bad part of relocating to a new state. And the 50% good comes when you're settled in your home and living an amazing life. You just have to get through the bad parts to experience the good. And the worse the bad part is, the more you are going to appreciate the good part. So that's the first concept. Life is 50-50, good and bad. The second concept that I want to talk to you about is that you can choose the thoughts that you think. When someone first told me that if I was thinking something bad, I could simply stop thinking that bad thought and think a good one, it changed my life. It sounds so simple, but before I discovered this concept, there were days when my negative or fearful thoughts just felt completely overwhelming. So now if I'm thinking something negative, I just tell myself, that thought makes me feel bad. What else could I think instead? Now, it's almost impossible to go from thinking that life sucks to thinking that life is amazing and rainbows and daisies, but you can choose to think a thought that makes you feel just a little bit better. So for example, if you feel incredibly sad at the thought of leaving your friends and family behind when you move, you could change that sad thought for one that may be like, well, vacations and holidays with friends and families are going to feel extra special now. Or you could think, well, I'll get to keep my old friends, but I'll make new friends too. Those thoughts don't necessarily make you feel happy, but they will make you feel just a little bit better about leaving friends and family behind. This concept of changing your thoughts from bad to good, or at least thinking thoughts that make you feel a little less anxious, will help you to find the positive in any situation, especially when you also understand the concept that life is 50-50, good and bad. So some days will be worse than others, but good days are always around the corner. So let's apply these two concepts to the 6 steps of managing your emotions. So the first step is listing everything that you're worried about and then ranking your worries from biggest to smallest. When you have lots of worries racing around in your head, they can feel overwhelming. But when you see them written down on paper, they just look like a list of problems that you can find a solution to. If you are watching the recording, you can pause right now and take 5 to 10 minutes and go somewhere quiet, or if you're watching this somewhere quiet, I want you to use either a piece of paper, or you could even use the notes section on your phone, and I want you to write a list of everything that's bothering you. From big stuff like finding a home or quitting your job, to small stuff like what if you can't find a restaurant that serves your favorite dish? If you aren't someone who likes to write things down, and I know that there are many of you out there, I really encourage you to do this, even if you just list 5 things that you're really worried about. But the more things that you write down, the calmer you are going to feel. And then once you've listed everything that you can think of that's on your mind that you're worrying about and that's stressing you out, I want you to rank that list from the thing that you're worrying about the most to the thing that you're worrying about least. Because step 2 is to take the issue that you're worrying about the most and think about everything that could possibly go wrong. And when I say things that could go wrong, I want you to take it to absolute worst case scenario. So for example, if your number one worry is finding a home, what is your worst case scenario about finding a home? Is it putting in offers on 20 homes and being rejected each time? Is it paying well over the asking price when you finally do find a home? Is it spending a fortune on hotels or Airbnbs while you wait to be able to get a new home? Or is it having to buy a home that you don't love just so you have somewhere to live in your new state? You need to think about your absolute worst case scenario in great detail for each of the issues that you list in step 1. And like I say, start with the thing that's worrying you the most and then work your way through the list to the things that you're worrying about least. Once you've decided what your worst case scenario is for each issue, I want you to move to step 3, which is to decide what you would do if your worst case scenario situation actually happened. It is very unlikely that worst case scenario will happen, but if it does, guess what? You will have a plan to deal with that situation, and that's going to help you feel much calmer. So if we use worst case scenario example of not being able to find a home, you may need to budget and to plan to stay in an Airbnb or a long stay hotel for a few months until you can find a home in your new state. You may also have to force yourself to stay positive when multiple offers you've made on homes fall through. Or you may have to accept that you'll just have to pay well over the asking price to get a home in a town or a community that you love. Or you may decide that after a certain number of offers fall through, that you're going to move somewhere else where buying a home is slightly less competitive. So for every worst case scenario that you wrote down in step 2, I want you to force yourself to come up with a solution. It won't necessarily be a solution that's going to make you happy, but it will allow you to make a difficult or frustrating situation feel a little bit better. For example, we had to stay in a Quality Inn, for 6 weeks before the home that we were waiting for in California to become available. We didn't enjoy it, but we knew that it was the cheapest and most convenient short-term solution. And then once we got into our home, we appreciated it so much more because of all the time that we'd spent in that hotel. So I would like to give you another example of how you can apply steps 2 and 3 to the other big concern that people have when they move, which is the thought of leaving friends and family behind. So step 2 obviously is imagining the worst case scenario. So say in the example of leaving friends and family behind, the worst case scenario is that there's another COVID kind of situation and you can't get to see your friends or your family and the people that you love in person for at least 2 years. What would you do in step 3 to manage that sadness and the loneliness that you would feel if you were put in a situation like that? So you can list out all of the things that you would do. For example, you could list the ways that you're going to stay connected with all the people that you've left behind. Cards and letters, gifts in the mail are so unexpected now in the days of digital technology. So they're a great way to make people feel loved and appreciated and to show them that you haven't forgotten about them. You can also plan on daily or weekly calls, texts, and FaceTime, because although they don't replace face-to-face talking or hugs, but they will help you ease that loneliness if you were put in worst case scenario and you couldn't see friends and loved ones for 2 years. The other thing that you could do is you could start to budget for vacations together, because this will give you something to look forward to. And then when you have the money set aside, it's going to allow you to make your time together even more special and create even more amazing memories. So these are just a couple of examples of how you can make a plan to deal with the worst case scenario that you've imagined in step 2. And you need to do this for every issue that you've been worrying about. But just remember that worst case scenario rarely happens. But when you've thought through the absolute worst case scenario and come up with a plan to deal with whatever is worrying you, it is going to make you feel much more prepared and more in control of the moving process. And I'm sorry, you'll see me keeping on touching my face. I feel like I have a fly or something that keeps landing on me. It's just been one of those days. Okay. So when you've created a solution for all of the issues that you are worrying about, in step 4, you are going to totally flip your thinking and see what best case scenario could be. So using buying home as an example, the best case scenario could be getting the first home that you put an offer on. What would you do then? How would you pack up and move as fast as possible? How excited would you feel? What would you do when you first moved in? How would you decorate? What would your neighbors be like? How would your family feel about moving into a home that they love so quickly? Thoughts like this will get you excited about your move and allow you to focus on all of these positive feelings. If you use the example of leaving friends and family behind, can you flip your thoughts and imagine being emotionally closer to friends and family when you leave? Because remember, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And because when you have a really short time with someone, you're on your best behavior and so are they, and you tend to overlook all of those little annoying things that you find about a person when you spend too much time with them. And this is going to make your time together so much easier and so much more fun. And I am talking from experience here because most of my family still live in England and we're incredibly close, and we make the most of our time together and create amazing memories even though the Atlantic Ocean is between us. So for every item on your list of worries that you created, find 1 or 2 positives about each situation. But I do understand in certain situations, it's impossible to find an upside. And if that's the situation, could you find something that makes you feel a little bit better about a situation? I know that this can be really hard to do, particularly when you're exhausted and stressed, but I promise you, you can find an upside to even the things that scare you the most. So for example, when we left California to drive back to Georgia, my worst case scenario was breaking down on a back road in the middle of nowhere with no cell signal because my truck is getting quite old. I couldn't find anything positive to think about that fear. But because we'd signed up for AAA, when I felt the anxiety and the worry about my truck breaking down coming on, I would focus on the fact that I knew that someone would eventually stop and help us, and they could drive us to a place with cell signal, and we could call AAA for a tow truck. That thought did not make me happy, because the idea of breaking down and having to wait for someone to come along and save you is never a good thought. But it did make me feel just a little bit less stressed about my truck breaking down, and it lessened my sense of overwhelm because I could see an upside and I could find a solution to that problem. So whenever possible, you want to flip your thoughts and find something really positive or a good upside to the issue that you're worrying about. But if that feels impossible, try and find that thought that makes you worry just a little bit less. And then moving on to step number 5. What could you do right now that would make that best case scenario more likely to happen? Because when you take action, no matter how small that action is towards making that best case scenario a reality, it's immediately going to make you feel a little bit more in control of the situation, and it will also help you feel more positive. So if we go back to that house buying scenario, could you put offers on multiple homes this week to increase your chances of getting that positive, outcome of getting your house straight away? Could you increase the offer that you made on your dream home so that you're more likely to get it? Could you write a personal letter to the homeowner explaining why you would love their home so much and why you are the best person for them to accept an offer from? Or you could start looking at slower markets where you're more likely to find a home in case every offer falls through, and then you would be ready to start looking in a different location for a home. If you go back to the example of missing friends and family, could you set up a savings account today just for flights and fun trips with friends and family? And then you could create an automatic debit into this account once a month so that you've immediately started saving for all those fun trips that you want to make with friends and family. Or you could do something even simpler. You could call your friends and family this evening and start making a wish list of all the places that you want to visit together. Or maybe you could start creating a list of all the things that you're going to do together when they come and visit you in your new home. Because when you start to take action, it creates momentum and it makes you feel more positive. So when you feel sad or negative, force yourself to do one thing that is going to make you feel just a little bit more in control and to lift your mood from negative and overwhelmed and stressed to feeling just a little bit more positive. And then that takes us to the final step, number 6, which is when you're stressed, force yourself to focus on the best case scenario, not that worst case scenario. If you remember what I said at the beginning of this live, you can change your thoughts. So whenever you find yourself thinking a negative thought, force yourself to think something positive, or at least think something that allows you to feel a little bit less bad. And I promise you, the more often you force yourself to change your thoughts from bad to good, the easier it becomes. So when negative thoughts come into your mind, tell yourself, I'm not thinking that. I have a plan to deal with worst case scenario. So instead, I choose to think about all the good things that will happen when I move. And then pull out your list that you've created of all those best case scenarios that you listed in step 4 and focus on all of those positive things that are going to happen when you move. And if you have time, do something that you listed in step 5 that makes that best case scenario more likely to happen. And staying positive is so much easier when you have a very clear vision for the future, which is why when you download my Make the Move guide, I will spend a lot of time coaching and guiding you so that you can imagine exactly what your life will be like in your new state. Because when you stay focused on your amazing future, which remember is the good 50% about your move, it will get you through the bad, stressful 50%, which is actually the moving and the planning and the packing up part. Because focusing on the future is particularly important if you have kids that are moving with you or you have adult kids that you're leaving behind, because you are the one that sets the tone for your family. So if you're focusing on the positives, you're looking forward to the future and you're treating your move as a great big adventure, they will feel that same positive energy and they'll feel the same way too. But if you're stressed, if you're anxious and constantly worried, they're going to feel that way too. And if you have pets, they're going to pick up on your worry and anxiety, and it's going to just compound all of the stress because you'll all be feeling stressed and anxious. So if you can focus on the positives, if you can focus on implementing all of these 6 steps, your relationships will be a lot happier and the whole moving experience will be a lot more enjoyable. So that is it. That is how you minimize the stress and overwhelm when you move. So to recap the 6 steps, you are going to list everything that you're worrying about in minute detail, and then you are going to rank your worries from most stressful to least stressful. And then for each item that you're worrying about on that list, you are going to list everything that could go wrong, and you are going to think of the absolute worst case scenario for each of those issues. And then in step 3, you are going to decide what you will do in each worst case scenario situation, because you know that worst case scenario is very unlikely to happen, but if it does, you'll be prepared so you can think about that worst case scenario a little bit less because you know that you have a plan. And then in step number 4, you are going to flip your thoughts and go from thinking about that worst case scenario, flip your thoughts to try and see how what you're worrying about could actually be like a best case scenario, because when you create that best case scenario, it's going to allow you to stay a lot more positive. And then in step number 5, you are going to list all of the things that you could do to make that best case scenario more likely to happen. And if you can possibly take action immediately, then that's going to create that momentum that's immediately going to make you feel more positive about your move. And then the final step, number 6, is to swap negative or stressful thoughts for positive, motivating thoughts. And you're going to focus on all the good things that are going to come from your move and not allow yourself to focus on the bad. Because remember, you've created a plan for worst case scenario. So if you are confident that you have your move all figured out and you don't need any additional guidance, then I wish you the best of luck, and I hope that these 6 steps will help you in your journey. And if you ever need me, you can reach out to me on Messenger, or you can come back to this event and post something in the comments and I'll immediately be notified. But if you found what I just shared really valuable and you would like help planning or budgeting for your move, then you are going to love my Make the Move guide, which, like I said earlier, you can download at AlisonWoodall.com. Through a series of short videos and detailed check sheets, I will show you how to find your perfect hometown in a state that you love. And if you think you've already found your perfect hometown, my guide is going to confirm all of the decisions that you've made. And then I will help you figure out exactly how much your move is going to cost, how to save money and avoid scams, and how to plan for all of the logistics involved when you move your whole life to a new state. So there is no need at all to feel stressed or overwhelmed or to question if you're doing the right thing. Because when you download my Make the Move guide, in about 3 to 4 hours, you will get very clear on what you want, where to move to, how much you can afford, and you'll feel certain that you're doing the right thing. Because when you feel certain about all of your decisions, you can move forward with confidence to live an amazing life in a state that you love.